Yes, I would. I think that we need to look at things like early voting, online voting, weekend voting, and any number of things. I think they all should be open for discussion. And one of the things that I think that we would do is perhaps to even look at redesigning the ballot so it is easier to read and easier to negotiate. So yes, I certainly think that that's the case. Another consideration that I have is that I think that perhaps we should consider making Election Day a state holiday. In that way, Rhode Island workers would have the day off, and they could really focus on the priority of voting on that day, and perhaps even engage in a celebration of their role in this important representative democracy. I think I could have the most impact on everyday Rhode Islanders by working on a passion of mine, and that is to restore civics education to the public schools. Not only that, I would want to extend that civics education to the adult population under the aegis of the Secretary of State's office. So many people have given up and don't vote anymore. And part of the reason is they do not have the commitment to voting and what I call the exercise of their political citizenship as they should. And I think the remedy to that certainly would be to restore civics education to public schools and to extend that to the adult population. I would work tirelessly with the General Assembly and the Commissioner of Education to restore civics education. And there are a number of members of the General Assembly who have this interest as well. So I think with their interest and the interest in mind of restoring, revitalizing, re-educating both young and old in this state, we need to do that, and I plan to do it. I believe that the voter ID law should be preserved. And the reason for that is simple. The voter ID law is doing what it was intended to do, and that is to prevent people from representing themselves as others and voting in their place. Rhode Islanders understand this implicitly. And I think our viewers need to understand that the Democrat candidate for Secretary of State, Nellie Gorbea, wants to repeal this law. And when I share that information with folks, they are aghast. Interestingly, the voter ID law in an editorial in the Providence Journal, I believe it was in September 19th of this year, simply asserted voter ID succeeds. And quite frankly, I agree. So I will fight any legislative effort to diminish the voter ID law or to repeal it because it is working and it is working effectively. I think Rhode Island needs to rethink its approach and practices involving small business. As the Secretary of State, I would create a business task force and advisory group. This would be consisted of business people, academics, and any Rhode Islander who's genuinely interested in improving the business climate and improving practices as it relates to business people. I further would create what I would call a broker advocate position within the Office of Secretary of State. And this person would be available to business people to guide them through the process. In essence, take them by the hand and connect them with the proper agency and the proper agent that they need to interface with in order to accomplish whatever it is that they want to accomplish. And I also call it an advocate position because this person would follow the member of the public, the small business person, through the process to be sure that services are provided expediently and they are provided effectively. And if not, this person would be an advocate for that small business person. I believe that the members of the General Assembly are and should be subject to the Open Meetings Act. These regulations were put in place simply so that the public has a right to know what Assembly members are doing, why, and for whose benefit. And of course, transparency is the underlying element here. And so we have to be able to know what our legislators are doing, when they're doing it, why they're doing it, and really who benefits from that. These regulations require active oversight, ongoing monitoring, and consistent enforcement. A recent report by Access Rhode Island pointed out that there has been failure in all these areas. Perhaps the responsibility for enforcing the Open Meetings Acts might need to be taken out of the Attorney General's office and placed, for example, in a nonpartisan, non-political office such as Inspector General or Ombudsman. Some people have even suggested that perhaps oversight of the open meetings law should be placed within the Secretary of State's department. As a former regulatory administrator, I would welcome that discussion and I would welcome the challenge.